When you did your original activism during Vietnam, obviously Nixon was your foe, right? On the larger scheme of things.
Yeah.
Today it's Trump. What would you say to him right now?
In my mind, sometimes when I lie in bed, I have conversations with him, and I feel like I understand something about because I lived with Ted Turner for 10 years. You have things in common. It's important to understand what he does and what he says. The behavior is the language of the traumatized. You can hate w the behavior, but you have to see through it to the traumatized person and not hate them.
It is on.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited today to talk to legendary actor and activist Jane Fonda. I've been wanting to talk to her for a while. I met her in person in Aspen when she was talking about climate change issues there. And I've always thought she was one of the most intelligent and forthright actors, but not just that, but activists, and been incredibly effective. She also has the distinction of being right all the time. She was right about Vietnam. She's right about a lot of these things. And she continues to engage herself, whether it's climate change, Trumpism, authoritarianism, the First Amendment. She doesn't just make speeches, she walks the talk. She is also a firecracker, and this was a fun but substantive conversation, so you better stick around. Jane, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
Well, it's an honor, obviously, for lots of reasons, but we ran into each other in Aspen, I think, correct? In the airport. And we talked about this a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember.
So let's talk about what you're doing now. You've been an activist for much of your life. You've been doing that, and you got a lot of pushback for that. The National Security Agency spied on you. You spent your 82nd birthday in jail, getting arrested for protesting in a climate change protest. Talk a little bit about what's happening now, because now you've never stopped, but you've reengaged on these issues around Renee Good and Alex Preddy and federal agents and all these arrests.
Well, I'm gonna step back to the macro view of it, I think. We're basically globally, we face two existential crises: climate and democracy. And they're totally interrelated, interdependent, and they have to be solved together. And the clock is ticking on the climate crisis. So
Hmm.
after the Fire Drill Fridays, which were the rallies that we had for about 5 months in DC
Hmm.
in 2019, and then for a couple of years online during the COVID crisis.
Hmm.
And when that ended, me and my team looked at each other and said, all of us collectively have been involved in decades of protest and civil disobedience and writing books and articles, etc. And we haven't gotten the legislation that we need
Hmm.
that's commensurate with what science is saying.
Hmm.
This is during the Biden administration.
Right.
And so we said, and we know the reason. The reason is because so many of our elected officials take money from the fossil fuel industry. And so we decided to create the Jane Fonda Climate PAC. And we decided strategically to focus down ballot. This was 5 years ago. Um, this is what the Tea Party did. State legislators, city councils, boards of supervisors,
Hmm.
school boards, public utilities.
Hmm.
Um, th- these positions have tremendous power when it comes to decision making on climate. Whether a toxic dump has to be taken away, whether a pipeline will come through the town, et cetera, and so forth. So we started, and we have been very successful. We had none of us had ever done anything like this before.
Right, gone on
So
the local
we'd been
level.
or been this invested in electoral politics.
Mhm,
We only support candidates who don't take money from the fossil fuel industry, and it's a pretty rigorous process that we put our candidates through. And we've had a lot of success. Last year, we supported 79 candidates, and 80% of them won. In Virginia last year, we won all 22 races, including flipping, um, 9 GOP seats in Virginia. In Pennsylvania, we helped flip the coal mining region of Luzerne County
mhm,
Council,
mhm.
and we have over 50,000 small donors and volunteers across the country, which is extraordinary. And, I really, especially once Trump was reelected, it's become even more strategic in my mind. We're building a firewall
Hmm.
We're also creating a deep bench for the Democratic Party because, some of the people that we supported early on are now in the Senate. Um, and of course, this year we are gearing up to help try to take back the House. We'll continue with our down ballot focus, but we will also help
So
take back the House.
the through line to all this is you're moving like a Tea Party, like, but a different version of that, correct?
Mhm.
Rather than protests or being outspoken. Are either of them more effective than the other from your perspective?
Well, I think we need everything.
Mhm.
You, you have to look at what's strategic right now. Protests are important because they force us to see, oh, we're not a minority. There's a lot of us. It's somebody described protesting as flossing the movement. Um, it's important for that reason. But when you have someone in office on the federal level who can be pressured, then protests are really important. Right now,
Right,
they're not going to change anything except make us feel good.
right, right,
So,
right,
they're important uh, because what we're facing has never happened here, at least to white people. We're facing an authoritarian regime who's broken through for the first time in American history to every sector of our government. And the theory of change right now is all governments, democratic or fascistic, are held up by pillars of support. And if the pillars of support become weakened, the regime is weakened. Pillars like the military, like the financial, like art, professionals, et cetera, and so forth.
So let's talk about that threat because you said in an interview last fall that it takes, quote, 18 to 22 months for an authoritarian to consolidate power. Once that happens, it's very hard to defend democracy. On my other podcast, Scott and I are publicizing a resist and unsubscribe movement he's organized, as you call it, non cooperation.
Right.
Do you think Americans are showing the required levels of urgency to meet the moment?
It's starting, but, what is not visible, it's like the rhizome underground, is organizing is happening all across the country in all the pillars. And that should give us great, great hope. Also, there's been a major overstepping of red lines, and people are really starting to wake up to what's happening, which leads me to the second. I said two crises,
Right, the
climate,
democracy.
and then there's the democracy crisis that we're talking about, this uh, coming to power of an authoritarian regime. They have to be solved together, these two crises. You can't have a stable democracy without a stable climate, and you can't have a stable climate unless you have a democracy. I mean, what we're seeing now is worse and worse things happening vis-a-vis the climate. So when I won the Lifetime Achievement Award at Screen Actors Guild,
Mhm.
I did some research to find out what kind of resistance has been in existence in the entertainment industry. And I was reminded that in the late 40s and early 50s, the House Un-American Activities Committee, when it was, and then later McCarthy, were destroying lives and careers in Hollywood, blaming people for, or accusing people of being friendly to communists anyway. Hollywood created the Committee for the First Amendment. My dad was a part of it. And so in October, I thought, now's the time to recreate this. Because, if you look at the history of authoritarianism, they always first go for art. They go after art and education because those are the sectors that affect how people feel, how they think. We're the storytellers. We can control the narrative to a large extent. So we come under attack right away. So we created this. We now have over 3,000 members, and we're being trained in how do you confront authoritarianism because it's different.
Mhm.
As you said, it's not just protest, it's non-compliance. And what does that mean? It means what happened when Kimmel was
Mhm.
threatened with being booted off his show,
Mhm.
and millions of Americans threatened to cancel their subscription to Disney.
Mhm.
Whoa. When it affects pocketbooks, suddenly everything
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
That is an example of non-compliance.
Mhm.
The reporters who had posts at the Pentagon and
Mhm.
were told they couldn't report on things they were seeing, en masse, they turned in their badge,
Mhm.
including Fox.
Right.
Noncompliance, strikes, boycotts, boycotts.
Mhm.
all those things are examples of noncompliance, and ideally, they're things that can affect the economy of the country.
There was a lot of opposition to ICE at the Grammys, for example. You also seen celebrities pull back. For example, Jennifer Lawrence said she'd reconsider her previously outspoken approach to politics and said, quote, celebrities do not make a difference whatsoever on who people vote for. And then you look at Bad Bunny last night at the Super Bowl, which I thought was very effective. He was doing all kinds of messaging that was very subtle, but very clear.
So beautiful.
Beautiful, right? It's also joyful.
Oh,
It's fun. If you
yeah.
didn't know
I
what he
never
was
cried at a halftime
Oh,
before,
really?
but
Oh,
it
really?
was the joy. It was the joy and the
But there were
love.
tons of political messages in
Oh,
there all
yeah.
over the place. So talk about, this idea of I guess it's celebrity activism, oh, that's kind of discounting it. Talk about where it is now.
I think, the fact that we're attacked first and foremost is an example. I mean, it's proof that it matters.
Mhm,
If they didn't attack us the way they did, then I would think, well, maybe it really doesn't matter. We're called coastal elite. You know, why are you speaking out? What do you know about this? And so forth and so on. But the fact is, artists model courage.
mhm,
Courage is contagious.
mhm,
Also, comics in particular.
mhm,
Ridicule and humor are the best ways of confronting authoritarianism. They don't know what to do about it. It's it the goal of the authoritarians is always to show we're impermeable, impenetrable. We are inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it. And then a kid comes along or a comic and says, look at you with no clothes, makes fun of the authoritarianism. It exposes their weakness. It's the last thing that authoritarians want. When we first formed October 1st and
mhm.
launched, and there was a lot of publicity,
This is the
I
committee for the
was
First Amendment.
the
Right.
Committee for the First Amendment. I was stunned at the response that we got
Mhm,
from movement leaders all around the country, from Europe,
mhm,
from all the major foundations.
mhm.
Wow, if we don't matter, why is everybody so excited that this has happened? And little by little, I began to understand. It's because they're trying to organize other pillars. And if celebrities and people in the arts pillar start to stand up and show courage, it's much easier for people in the banking pillar or in the professional pillar to say, well, God, if he can do that, if she can do that, I can stand up and be brave. So it's really, really important.
Now, you call it the Committee First Amendment. It was originally founded, as you said, during the Red Scare. As you mentioned, your father, Henry Fonda, was a member. Talk a little bit about because free speech, this idea of the First Amendment, has been co opted by the right. It's been co opted by the tech overlords, even if only superficially. You could also make the case the left have abandoned it a little bit. Talk about what it means to you and why you thought it was important to revive this at this
Well,
moment in
it's the
time.
cornerstone of democracy. It's also the cornerstone of art. I mean, you can't have art if you don't have free expression. But the First Amendment isn't just free speech, it's the five freedoms. It's freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom to protest. And that means for anybody, we have to recognize that a far right winger has all those same rights. And if you really believe in the First Amendment, you have to support her or his right, even if you don't agree with it. That's the strength of it. This is a nonpartisan issue. As I said on the Colbert Show, this is not a question of left or right. It's a question of right or wrong.
In the 1970s, during the middle of the Vietnam War, you traveled to 80 cities in 3 months. You did an anti war slideshow about women in Vietnam. Talk about that time and what did you learn that's relevant for today when everyone is living in algorithmically controlled media bubbles, as you know?
The big problem now is that the right has taken over all the media. They have their own media, and they've been very, very smart in taking over the new media. And so we have to become ubiquitous to the extent that we can. Back
Mhm.
in the 70s and 80s, the 60s and 70s, that wasn't the case. And because we didn't have phones, we didn't have this, we had to talk to people. And that was a big difference. And that was both good and bad. It takes longer, it's harder, but when you get through, it's more meaningful.
Mhm.
You've really made contact and you've changed people. And so what we did starting in 1972, traveling to 80 cities in 3 months, 2 years in a row,
Mhm.
we changed people. We went into the middle of the country and we talked to people where they were. We started at the Ohio State Fair, and, that was a huge learning
Well, tell me what you learned there and how
that
you.
it's important to talk to people,
Mhm.
to not be partisan, to listen hard, and then present all the facts, and it was very simple. That's what we did. We weren't people, McGovern was campaigning, there were campaigns going on. We didn't take part in that. We just talked about what was really happening on the ground in Vietnam, which was contrary to what Nixon was saying, and it had an effect on people.
So how do you do that today? How do you apply that today when you're doing this?
Organizers are on the ground in a way that the Democratic Party hasn't been. I think a lot of what's happening today is because the Democratic Party got in bed with its donors and stopped talking to people,
Mhm.
especially in the middle of the country. People used to see the party come in and put money into a community.
Mhm.
Here, $10,000, organize your community.
Mhm.
That kind of thing isn't happening anymore.
Mhm.
And you can't organize with this. You
Mhm.
can rally, but you
Mhm.
can't organize.
Right.
And we have to get back to the organizing. In Mamdani's big success was because he talked to people. He listened.
Mhm.
It, it was local. And I think that that needs to happen again.
You've noted that the Democratic Party leaders are not good enough and they aren't doing what they need to do to stand up to authoritarianism. Um, they are not in power right now, too, at the same time. But are there any Democrats like Mamdani, besides Mamdani, bucking the trend and impressing you? Is there? Do you see it around the country as you go around
On down ballot levels and in Congress, some of the people that we've gotten, I mean, Greg Casar, for example, um,
in Texas?
Summer Lee,
I've
men
interviewed
and
him.
men. Hmm?
I've interviewed
Yeah,
him. He's very impressive.
yeah, and he was like the very first year that we formed the PAC, he was one of our candidates. Um, there are people like him now. Everybody say, "Who you're going to vote for president?" It's too soon. We don't know what's going to happen between now and 28,
Hmm.
and also the president is already telling us that he's prepared to mess with the midterms, and we can see signs of that, trying to do away with mail-in ballots, all kinds of ways in which they're trying to get in the way of a really fair election in the midterms.
Hmm.
Um, and what this means is that registering voters and inspiring people to vote is an organizing tool.
Hmm.
We have to put all of our energy now into inspiring people to
Hmm.
vote. N Not even so much to do with who the candidate is.
Hmm.
This is a tool that we still have, and if we don't use it
Hmm.
now, it's not gonna be there later. I mean, this
Hmm.
is a real case of use it or lose it. So exercise democracy.
So one of the things you talk about is the ability for, you're a well-known person. And one of the things you've also been doing, you just talked about mainstream media being taken over also.
And the
And
new media
and the
too.
new media. Now you've
Yeah.
been speaking out against Netflix proposed purchase of Warner Brothers Discovery. You haven't minced your words in opposition. I'm going to read part of the statement you put out that Warner Brothers Discovery has accepted a purchase bid as an alarming escalation of the consolidation that threatens the entire entertainment industry, the democratic public it serves, and the First Amendment. Make no mistake, this is not just a catastrophic business deal that could destroy our creative industry. It's a constitutional crisis exacerbated by the administration's demonstrated disregard for the law. On the other hand, the other bidder is Larry Ellison and the Paramount folks who have their own agendas, let's just say. So talk about what you would like to see happen, because if you're talking about the arts as a cultural important pillar of these changes and in speaking out, what happens in these kind of consolidations?
The Committee for the First Amendment isn't taking sides in terms of which party that's trying to merge is better than the other. We're opposed to mergers because a lot of people lose jobs. We have less bargaining power. We have fewer studios to go to negotiate. Um, And because Trump has taken over, I can't remember what it's called, merger control, he has say-so now over who gets to merge. He is imposing, um, limits on the First Amendment. He's saying you have to do this, you can't hire this, you can't say these things. In our major cultural and media institutions, we have to stop that.
So whichever merger you think, because the traditional
Yeah, just,
the
all
traditional
mergers.
business model is under strain. Ticket sales are down more than 20% since 2019. We're recording this on Monday, just after SAG-AFTRA is about to again enter negotiations with the studios. There'll be issues over AI, compensation, creative control. Given the damage caused by the last strike and diminishing demand for the product, talk about the moment that Hollywood is in then. If they're going to be someone that's going to defend the First Amendment, the business is under enormous strain.
There've been a lot of mergers that were including just towards the end of my marriage to Ted Turner, there was so much pressure on him
Mhm.
to merge with AOL
Mhm.
and Time Warner,
Mhm.
and then all those other mergers that happened after that. You know, it's interesting because I said to Ted, "Why? You know, you have such a successful business." He said, "Because," I'm paraphrasing. He said, "If I don't become part of a bigger institution, I'm gonna get eaten. You know, this is capitalism. You have to keep getting bigger." Um, and it turned out very badly
It did.
for Zaslav and for
Mhm.
Warner Brothers.
Mhm.
So, you know, I am
It
not
was
a
Jerry
business
Levin for
person.
that one. I wrote a whole book on it. It was
And yeah,
yeah, that was Jerry
Jerry
Levin.
Levin.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people saying to do, you know, John Malone and a lot of really smart people. Mike Milken were telling him to do this, and Ted didn't. He didn't feel good about it.
It was the wrong
Y-
deal. You
Yeah,
had the correct instincts on that one.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
Ted had the correct instincts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So when you look at today, when they're saying that to you, all of them, what do you say to them? Given they've got pressure from tech, they've got pressure from the audiences who are rushing towards technology faster than they're and running away from Hollywood, and AI obviously plays an enormous part.
I can't pretend to have answers to that. I don't know. I've asked a lot of people in the business people in the entertainment industry, if Warner Brothers Studio, can't it really stand on its own? And they all say, "Yeah, it can." And so then why not just leave that there, remaining as it is, this great historic movie factory, and you know, maybe the smaller things go to other entities, I don't know. But the major mergers that absorb all these studios, I mean, there were so many more studios when I started out. It's bad for us. And the industry is hurting enough. To then restrict even more is gonna really, and it's so hard right now to have a middle class life if you're unless you're a, you know, above the line A-list actor. It's sad, and I don't know what the future is.
So one
I
of the
don't
things,
think the
go ahead.
murders are the solution, though.
No, I think they just like to merge. So you've been a mentor to women in Hollywood for decades too, and every episode we get an expert to send us a question. So same for you. We've got an expert who's been on the receiving end of your kindness, comedian Chelsea Handler. Let's listen.
Jane Fonda took me like to school one day, invited me to her house, and basically told me that my behavior had been terrible at one of her parties at her house. Like she like took me to town, and in the most gentle, loving way. And I wrote a chapter in my book about it, and it's the story of her doing that and how that changed my life forever. Because she was like, "Your behavior was awful." And like the fact that she took the time to say that to me was huge. You know, most people would be like, just, I'm not going to talk to that person again because nobody has those difficult conversations. You know what I mean? People are so avoidant, especially in Hollywood. And it was really like, it made me realize the type of woman that I wanted to be.
Why did you go out of your way to help Chelsea? Talk about that. Like you've done that quite a bit. Why are you doing this now? Like everyone's like Jane Fonda doesn't have to do any more work. She did a lot, so it's much easier to walk
But just
away.
that philosophy, I don't relate to it at all. Like, there's some point in life where you stop getting better or stop trying to get better or stop mattering. No. I I love Chelsea Handler. She is an extraordinary human being. You know, not many people are able to say, "Ooh, I don't like that about myself. I'm gonna change," and then actually do it. She has changed,
She has.
and she's the only other person besides me that I know that has done that because
Mhm.
I've done that. Um, and it can be done, and
Mhm.
I just respect her tremendously for that. I don't do that with everybody,
Mhm.
just a few people.
Just a few people. What is the impetus for you in doing that? When people are looking, I often point to you when they were like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do anything." I'm like, "Look at Jane fucking Fonda. Like, look over there because
Why
she's."
does everybody always says "fucking Fonda"?
I don't know why. It
Anyway,
goes together with you. Sorry, apologies. Excuse
no
me.
problem. It's common though. Anyway,
Yeah.
so what is the
Well,
question?
it's a compliment, I believe.
Thank you.
When you have that impetus, when people do feel hopeless, what is your do you ever feel that way? And what do you tell people when they are, where they feel like they don't have a say? Because being small is a good way to stop people, making them feel small is a good way to stop people from activism or their best instincts, for example.
I am part of a long line of very depressed people, and for a good part of my life, I was a glass half empty kind of gal.
Hmm.
Okay, so it doesn't come naturally to me.
Hmm.
But I remember there was a time when it was about 112 degrees in Los Angeles, and then there were wildfires. And I stepped out and I looked at the sky. It was brown, orange, apocalyptic. I read that birds were falling dead out of the sky. I'm a birder. I I I was so depressed. I got a bird feeder, I got a bird bath and went to bed, and it was hard to move. And then I said, "Fuck it." I said, "I'm gonna make a difference." And I knew I wasn't doing enough, and so I called the woman who at the time was the director of Greenpeace USA, Annie Leonard. I said, "I wanna come and make a difference. I wanna come to DC and make a difference. I wanna raise a ruckus. What can I do?"
Hmm.
And together with her, we created Fire Drill Fridays, and the
Hmm.
minute I did that, my depression lifted.
Hmm.
And then I heard Greta Thunberg say, "Everybody goes looking for hope.
Hmm.
Look for action,
Hmm.
and hope will come." Hope is very different than optimism. Optimism is everything's gonna be fine, and you don't do anything about it. Hope is a muscle. Hope is when you fight. Hope can be rage-filled,
Hmm.
breaking down the door with a battering ram. Václav Havel was in prison in 1984, 85 by the communists in Czechoslovakia. He was the famous
Yes, of
playwright,
course. Yeah.
Czech playwright.
Amazing playwright, too.
Yeah, and I'm paraphrasing, but in prison, he said, you know, hope is not about fighting for something because you think it's gonna succeed.
Hmm.
Hope is about fighting because it's right. And then
Hmm.
he was president of the country. We never know what the future holds, but it's within that unknowing that hope can grow.
I've been in California during one of those periods. What got you moving? Because I want to and talk about this foundational work as an activist right now, the environmentalism. But what got you moving to that?
Well, because I know I have a platform and I knew that I wasn't using it fully enough. And I just made the decision that I was going to do it no matter what. I was going to step up. I've been an activist for decades, but I knew that it wasn't enough right now. And so I'm going to do it. And I just made the decision. And the minute I did that, I became hopeful and I've remained hopeful ever since. Even now, I
Hmm.
am. Also because I'm not alone.
Right.
I work in with a team and a community. Building community is critical.
So the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, it's helped elect over 200 candidates. And just for people who don't know, the stated goal is to unseat politicians in the pocket of big oil and replace them with climate champions. And you talked about your down ballot strategy and the deep bench. Can I have more details about those plans for the midterms? What is the strategy from your perspective that you can talk about?
We want to elect as many people as we can to the House. So my team, and I can't pretend that I am the expert, but my team is small, but they have a great deal of expertise and they're looking at which are the winnable seats all around the country. And then in some instances we just give money. In some instances I go there. That's always interesting because we triple the amount of money they can raise, we quadruple the amount of volunteers they can get. We also train and do we help in many ways besides just giving money.
So when you think about that, when you give these young activists, climate activists advice, where do you try to focus their pressure? Because there's the courts, the elections, the tech companies for right now are building these data centers. How do you resist that given the here you are trying to stop one climate thing with cars, and then it moves to AI data centers, and then it moves, et cetera.
Right. At our last PAC board meeting, we had a presentation, from experts on data centers. They can be less destructive. They can be run on alternative energy, which, of course, the Trump administration is opposing. But we decided as a board to now we not only won't support anybody that's in favor of expanding fossil fuels, but we don't support people that are in favor of data centers or SMRs, small modular reactors. I've done quite a bit of research into these. They're they're being touted as this is the solution to climate.
Hmm.
They take just as long to build, which
Hmm.
means that we go beyond the red line for climate.
Hmm.
10 years, 20 years is too late.
Hmm.
That's how long it takes for them to get online, even the
Hmm.
small ones.
Hmm.
Another really bad thing is the radioactive waste from SMRs is different chemically than from a traditional reactor. It's exotic chemicals. They can't be mixed together. So now we're talking about we haven't even solved the problem of the traditional waste. Now we have a whole new set of radioactive waste that we have to try to figure out. Also, the use of water and the amount of money it costs, which taxpayers, I didn't realize it. Taxpayers end up paying the bulk of the costs of nuclear reactors, even if they never go online.
Yeah. And
Come
they're also paying
on.
a lot of the data center costs and things like
Yeah.
that, and which is interesting to when you think
So
about.
so it's SMRs, it's data centers, and it's fossil fuels. These things are critical.
Yeah. Does it feel like you're still in the China syndrome? Your movie? That was a million when was that? That was, like, so long ago when that was,
Early '80s, maybe?
yeah.
Late
I interviewed
'70s?
Oliver Stone, and he said, "Jane Fonda's done more damage to nuclear energy than anyone else." I was
Good.
like, I said, "Well, I guess we can't put it at her feet, but fine, whatever." Because as you know, he's for nuclear energy, as you know.
Uh-huh.
What do you make of some leaders like Elon Musk used to be a climate change supporter, right? Meaning deal with it. He's now gone the other direction, in a direction none of us quite understand. And at the same time, he's talking about leaving Earth, going to Mars today or yesterday. He said we have to have he's building a moon city so he can get to Mars. When you look at now, he's sort of the personification of villainous tech, essentially wanting to get off the planet. How do you look at people like that, where that's their solution is like, we're not going to deal with climate change. Instead, we're just going to leave for Mars, which is not a very nice place to live, by the way. Neither is the moon.
Well, I mean, I think all of them changed because of money. I think it's based on greed. I can't think of any other reason why he's made such a switch. Um, Maybe he was always that way, but he covered it up because he was getting so popular, and, because he had a little sense of humor and he had all the electric cars and everything. I don't know.
What would you say to someone like him or some of these tech overlords?
I would try to reason with them. I would try to explain that we have to have soil and diversity and wildlife and trees and plants and air and water so that human beings can continue to live here because you're never going to remove everybody from here to some other planet. How dare we consider ourselves so much more important than the other sentient things that are on this planet that we could just dismiss them and assume that a few of us will get up there somehow. Is this how you want to be remembered? Even that is a stupid thing to say
Hmm.
because who's going to remember at that point?
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point. Right,
Yeah,
because it's all over unless they bring the
yeah.
books that they're interested in. So when people are thinking about these issues, I have two more questions. how do you keep them? You seem like a very, I know you said you had some depression and everything else, but how do you keep people hopeful? Because people feel, I do feel there's energy returned within some of the movements. You can feel it after Minnesota, or even Don Lemon of all people really like went out there and did stuff, right? Like someone who was an anchor at a traditional CNN. What advice do you give to people to keep going? Because people do have a hopelessness to them, and yet you see these, as you said, these seedlings of hope, different places.
People are ready. People are saying, "Tell me what to do." And right now, what to do is get trained. It's called freedom trainers. They do non-cooperation 101. I've had them done both on the East and West Coast for members of the Committee for the First Amendment. Get ready, understand authoritarianism and how it can be defeated, and learn how to be safe. Develop a community that can help each other. One of the reasons that the resistance in Minneapolis has been so robust is because they were organized. They were trained to know what to do. Who's gonna be in charge of medical? Who's gonna be in charge of food? They knew how to de-escalate. Um, we all have to become like Minneapolis, and it can be done. Again, freedom trainers is one example of a they're training people, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country.
How do you find hope? One of the things I'm wrapping up a documentary series for CNN about longevity, and it was inspired by all these tech billionaires that want to live forever, which I think is enormously narcissistic. But there are all these. Well, I'm
Yes.
sure you agree, right?
Yes, I do.
And at the same time, my feeling is that mortality gives us creativity. It gives us impetus to do things, right?
It makes sense of life.
That's correct. That is correct.
Unless you embrace and understand and kind of are okay with death, life has no meaning.
That's right. Right. And there's actually studies showing if you ignore it, death, you become hateful. And if you accept it, you become community based, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. There's all these scientific studies showing it.
When I was 60, I did the smartest thing in my whole life. I realized, okay, I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared of getting to the end with a lot of regrets when it's too late to do anything about it. So that means, because I was confused, how am I supposed to live my last act? How I'm supposed to live my last act is so I'll be okay when the end comes. Obviously, we don't none of us know when the end is gonna be, but you have to make a vision of how you want I want to die at home in my bed.
Hmm.
I wanna be surrounded by loved ones.
Uh huh.
That means between now and then, I gotta be sure people love me. I have to be sure I deserve love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to be able to have a few wise things to figure out how you wanna be at the end, even if you know you don't have any control over it, and then that informs how you're gonna live between now and then, and it's made all the difference in my life. I've gone into therapy at 82 years old. Never too late to figure it out.
Did you find anything really good out?
Yeah, but it takes too long on this.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. But when you think about that idea of living your best life, right? And you show no signs of slowing down. Do you have I know it sounds crazy, but a secret? I'm not talking about your skin regimen, which your skin is excellent, by the way. But when you think about what the kind of things you can put into it. Now, when you were doing your career when you were 30s, you took a great risk and turned out to be right. But at the time, you got attacked relentlessly, right? What you're doing now, you're certainly getting more celebrated for. Obviously, your activism is more celebrated. But I think one of the things, the reasons I want to talk to you is because I want people to feel they don't have to be Jane Fonda to do this, right? That
Mhm.
you don't have to be you, essentially. So do you
Right.
have a secret or anything else or not? Just getting up or
Um, I meditate, and I meditate to keep myself hopeful, to keep myself grounded, and to keep myself present. Also, sometimes when I'm meditating, problems arise and get solved. It's so interesting. And I've started on Substack recently, and I just began, and people loved I took them on a meditation with me, and the reaction was so positive, but I'm gonna do it every time, so that's one thing. Another thing is sleep, getting enough sleep so that I have energy because I get very depressed if I don't get enough sleep. Then, maybe as important or more, Don't be alone. You're vulnerable when you're alone. You're vulnerable to depression. You're also vulnerable to danger, to ice, to all kinds of things, to being not impactful. All of us, those of us who are alive right now, are blessed because we have the chance to turn everything around. I feel so lucky to be born right now. And in order to do it right, I got to do it with other people and make sure that what we're doing is is the right thing to do, that it's not just frivolous or it doesn't really make any difference. And what got me to be smart was calling on smart people to help me,
Mm.
to guide me.
Mhm.
And I now have a team around me that is very experienced and totally strategic and very connected to the entire ecosystem of movement across the
Mhm.
country.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'm I don't I okay, so not everybody can do that necessarily, but you can join a local indivisible.
Mhm.
You can organize your neighborhood. These local pods of people who will help each other when not only the authoritarianism shit hits the fan, but when the climate shit, we have to harden our communities and make them resilient in all kinds of ways, including security. And you can't do that alone. Get to know your neighbors, know their phone numbers and emails. Talk about who's going to do what if this happens or that happens. And being in the training helps you think in those kind of ways.
Right, absolutely.
Know things like if you risk going into an area where there's tear gas, take out your contacts,
Mhm.
you know,
Good to
buy a
know.
whistle,
Good good
things
to know.
like
Thank you
that.
for that piece
Yeah.
of advice, Jane Fonda. So one of the things you were when you did your original, activism during Vietnam, obviously Nixon was your foe, right, on the in the larger scheme of things.
Yeah.
Today, it's Trump. What would you say to him right now? Do you think you can change his mind?
I couldn't. I tried. I wanted to. I know him. I've met him. He used to really like and admire Ted, my ex-husband, Ted Turner. And I feel because I spent a decade with Ted Turner, I understand Trump a little bit because they have certain things in common, early trauma at the hands of the father, etc. And in my mind, sometimes when I lie in bed, I have conversations with him, and I want to say to him, I feel like I understand something about because I lived with Ted Turner for 10 years. You have things in common. Do you understand what's happening? I would try to touch his heart. There was when he first got elected in 2017, I wanted to go and meet with him with a bunch of really brilliant, sexy women and kneel at his feet.
Mhm.
And because I thought, well, this would work with Ted
Yeah.
and tell him he could be a global hero if he saved the planet.
Mhm.
And Pamela Anderson was willing to go with me.
Mhm.
Um, and then Ivanka and Jared, it didn't happen. There was no help getting there.
Mhm.
It's important to understand what he does and what he says, the behavior is the language of the traumatized. And you have to see through it. You can hate wh- the behavior, but you have to see through it to the traumatized person and not hate them. Because if you hate them, then it brings you down. I don't hate him. Joy Behar got really mad at me on The View when I said that.
Yeah.
But I feel better. I view all these guys and Musk and the others, they're not well.
No.
It's the not wellness that we see acted out.
Yep.
I'm
You're
so
100%
sorry
right.
that this happened to them in their lives.
Mhm.
And I would try to touch that early Trump,
If you could get
but
to it.
I don't think I'd succeed.
Yeah, if you could get to it. I don't think you can at some point. There is one point. I said one time to one of these tech moguls, "I'm so sorry your parents didn't hug you enough as a child, but you need to stop." And they looked at me and I go, "I gotcha, but you
Yeah,
need to stop. They're dead.
yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
need to move on."
There's a
Anyway,
statute of limitations.
yes, get some help.
And
Get
now
some help.
move see, this is what happened with Ted Turner. There was a point in his life where he intentionally moved towards the light, moved to the side of the angel. He decided, and he changed himself. God bless him.
God bless him. Anyway, Jane Fonda, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cara, very much.
Today's show was produced by Christian Castro-Russell, Michelle Eloy, Megan Burney, and Kaylin Lynch. Nishat Kurwa is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Special thanks to Annika Robbins. And our theme music is by Trackademics. If you're already following this show, you deserve love. If not, go meditate on why you haven't subscribed. Thanks for watching. See you on Monday.